All right. Yeah, so welcome you guys. Welcome to the 2027 Quebec Canada Games Coach Enhancement Series. So this is a series put on by the Canadian Sport Institute Atlantic. So myself, Natasha Johnson, I'm the coaching director at the Canadian Sport Institute Atlantic. We do things like this offering Atlantic wide to support all of our Atlantic coaches, especially with something like Canada Games where it does impact all of our provinces. We also have Allison on the line, Allison Saunders. So she works with our Coaching Nova Scotia and the Canadian Sport Institute Atlantic and helps deliver a lot of our comp dev. And we have Lynn Boudreau on the line somewhere. There she is with Sport PEI. So another one of our partners in there's Lynn in Canada Games and coaching development. So for those in PEI, I'm sure you already know Lynn, but she's your contact for things. And then for those in Nova Scotia, Allison, as far as Canada Games stuff, is really your main contact. I'll walk us through the content we're going to go through today, and let's get rolling. Okay. So what is the Coach Enhancement Series? So we've done this a few times through now. So some of you may have actually been part of our first Coach Enhancement Series, which was coming up like for the last Winter Games. Is anyone able to put up a reaction if you were involved in our very first Coach Enhancement Series on the run up to the, I can't even think of what games that would have been, 2023. 2023 Canada Games. Lynn was, of course. Yeah. Todd. Okay, I was going to say Todd Langdon. I thought maybe you had joined some of those sessions. So thanks for being here again today. And I may shoulder tap on you guys, especially for some of your experience coming out of the last games and being involved. For all of the rest of you guys, so what did you sign yourselves up for? What is this series about? So it's a three-part series and it's focused on just our Atlantic Canadian coaches and some ideas. So we're going to give you today, it's only 1 hour. We're going to let you go at 1 o'clock. We know everyone has busy lives. It's going to be focused on giving you some things to think about, an opportunity to share with each other. So there will be 2 points today where I'm going to hope that some of you are willing to unmute yourself and have a chat with your colleagues on here about some best practices. And then we'll bring you, some more information over the different sessions. So we spread the sessions out by a few months in the run up to the games. So in this series, for example, we're starting now. Our next session will be in May 2026, and then the final session will be in November 2026, just a few months out from the games. In between these sessions, again, you have your provincial representatives to reach out to and ask questions. You can always come to any of us to ask any questions. And we really want to see Atlantic Canada do as best as possible at these Canada Games. So we are here to support you in your journey, whether you're a brand new coach thinking about going to the games or whether you've done this for multiple games. So who are we? I introduced a few of us already. So myself, I'll be kind of walking us through today. My photo's up on the top there with all the snowboarders, and I threw that in there because this is a winter sports session. That was my background. So I have a deep love for Canada Games. I did coach, I went as an athlete in one sport, in gymnastics. And then I coached 3 different Canada Games cycles for snowboard. Really deeply loved it, loved the experience, this age group. There's so many benefits to the games. And then also coached a summer games in softball, which was a really cool experience. So I've seen it from 3 different sports over many games. Got to go as a mission staff as well to a different games and just absolutely love all things about it. So I look forward to chatting with you guys about it. And then again, if you want to look through who we have today, today really worked out. You guys, this is a fantastic mix. I see ringette on there now too as another sport that just jumped on. We have a massive mix of sports. You'll notice on the 3 calls as we go, because we offer Atlantic wide, you're going to see a mix and hopefully you'll meet a few of your colleagues who are be at the games as well. Who is potentially, because I know you may not all be finally named, but who potentially would be going to their first games as a winter coach or as a team coach? Okay, so we got at least 3. Okay, who would be going as a second games? So if our firsts put their reaction down, who would be going to second? Second games. Pat Thompson, Helga. Okay. And then who's done three or more games? Cass and Todd. Yep. Okay, perfect. So, those that have done three or more games, I'll definitely be shoulder tapping later on when we have a chat. Those that are going to their first games, big welcome. We are going to chat a little bit at the start. So for those, oh, Jody first. Okay, no problem. I think we have a good group of first games experience. So first few slides here, we're going to go through mainly for those that are attending their first games. Good reminder for those potentially attending their second. And for our more experienced group, again, I'll ask you to really speak up as we dive more into it and share your experience with the group. So the first thing that you have here on your slide is where to begin. So the first place that we ask all of our Canada Games coaches to do, and this is also actually a good reminder for those who have already gone to games, you can redo the module, is to start with the Coaching Association of Canada's Canada Game Coaching module. This was put out a few years ago. I think it was out for the 2023 games. So those that went the last time probably did do this or could have done it. If you haven't, go through it. Those that are going to their first games, I definitely recommend it. I've put along the right-hand side here the 6 modules, but it gives you a good overview. It takes about 45 minutes to complete, and it gives you a little bit of an idea of how the games operate and how they're a little different from any event that you would have attended before with this level of athlete. So with your junior age, junior level athlete. So it goes through some of your pre-event planning, an overview of travel to and from the game, sort of how the logistics generally work, event and team management, what the competition is going to be like, and then what's done at the end. So again, start with that, 45 minutes. We're not going to cover anything in that during these, so I do suggest you go in and get that completed. So again, for those going into their first games, we're going to talk about a little bit about what did you sign up for? And I'll say, like, I mean, there's a few of us on the line that went back multiple times. So I will say it's a wonderful experience for most. It was very, very fun, exciting, really great time for the athletes. It's an exhausting few final months, and the week at the games is quite draining. So in one of the later sessions, we'll also talk about, what's your recovery plan post games, but we won't worry about that yet. But do know, you're coming into it's a busy time to prepare these athletes to the level that they're going to want to be at. But it's an experience like no other sporting event. It's a very unique event and it's done very well. And it's going to be a test of your planning and communication practices. And you're going to notice a theme through our chats that we have around how are you communicating with your teams. So what we're going to do is dive further into how the Canada Games might be different from your current experiences as coaches already, whether that's provincial, Atlantic, national, international. Canada Games are still different than a singular sport experience. So we're going to really focus on that aspect. And then how you can get ahead of communication and planning challenges to set yourself up for really successful games in Quebec. So we're going to quickly dive into a few highlights about how it's different. I will send you guys if you want the slides after, by the way. So if you're trying to take notes, don't worry about it. I can send you all the slides after. So how is this different? So some of the ways that the Canada Games is different from, say, a national championships, or even if you were to go to a World Cup, a World Championships, a singular sport games, some of the ways that it's different is that you'll be working within a large, complex games ecosystem. So at an event like this, there's mission staff, there's opening and closing ceremonies to which you'll be involved depending on your sport. You'll be involved in one of those. Um, there's a lot of media. So even though it's a junior event, there is a great media lens on this event. And typically you may get a small media presence at, say, a nationals or international event, but this event gets an interesting level of media. So the athletes and you will be dealing with that. You get to live in a village, like an athlete's village. So that's also a unique aspect of this event compared to most sport events that are not large major games. There's a medical team, there's a medical clinic. So for some that may be new, or it might be enhanced compared to a general most events that you'd be going to. And then there's the inter-sport logistics. So the fact that there's many different sports going on, it does create a wonderful layer of complexity, but it does add a layer of complexity to the experience. So the athletes will be in a games village, which again, these are mostly teenage athletes. And so it's exciting, but it adds a lot of distractions. So they're going to be interacting with a lot more athletes, new athletes, athletes from across the country, big volumes, and they're all going to be staying in a pretty small area and have things to do. So as coaches, starting to think about now, how are some ways we're going to keep them busy, and kind of deal in our planning with this very chaotic but wonderful village environment. For some of you, your team may have coaches or not coaches, athletes from different clubs, which could be unique to your current coaching experience. So some of you may just coach in a club. If you coach a provincial team, you might be more used to this structure. Depends on kind of what your experience is. But you generally get athletes kind of melding together for Canada Games who may not have trained or played together. So especially our sports online, like our team sports, like a ringette or a hockey, you might have a nice mixing of athletes that have never played together. So super fun, but adds a little different environment. And then the other thing is that you're going to be there representing your province. So again, many of our sports operate mainly out of operating representing clubs, but you are really there representing your province, and you're not just there representing your PSO, which again, when you go to a nationals, it's usually like you're there for badminton, New Brunswick. You're there representing Nova Scotia, period, regardless of the sport. So it brings with it a few extra layers because of that. You've got your mission staff coordination, team uniforms, which are always exciting. Lots of different layered policies involved, accreditation rules. Because of all these things, there generally is a higher expectation for leadership. So that's why we want to talk to you guys ahead of time and make sure that you're feeling really ready. But it's a big youth multi-sport environment, so there are, good layers in place. Strict rules. So this is a big one that some of our coaches don't necessarily understand, is you actually have very set schedules for transportation, meals, and competition windows at the games that are not in your control. So they're set ahead of time. They're set by the games because it is so large and such a complex event. If you need the bus moved by half an hour, it may not be possible. And that's something where you usually have more control over that when you're attending a national championships or running a camp on your own or going to some other event. And there's going to be a moment of kind of releasing control and going with what the schedule is at Canada Games and planning around what's given to you. Because you do, as coaches, you'll have less control over your training time, logistics, and transportation, meal times. Those are all set for you. You can work within them. We'll get into that more, but generally, those things are set. So also planning to adapt to downtime. So when you have gaps in your schedule, how are you filling your time? How are the athletes moving from thing to thing? And how are you working on a routine while you're there? Yeah, and you're there as supervisors, of course. So, any questions from our new coaches, particularly, any questions on sort of what the Canada Games experience might look like in a very quick little snapshot that we gave you versus maybe what you've experienced in before? You can always put them in the chat too. And if not, we'll keep going. You can ask after too. So we are 460 or 459 days out from the games. So what we're going to spend a little time on today is some selection talk. So just a quick show of hands. Who's finalized their teams? Who has their final team in place? Cool. That's what we'd expect. No one yet. Who has a core team named? So they've maybe made some selection and they have a smaller defined group. Is anyone at that point? Okay. Pat is with badminton. Cool. And who's still dealing with the full pool? So the full massive, that should be, I guess, everybody else is still looking at full pool of athletes. Yeah. Cool. Okay. That's actually great news because what we're going to talk about is basically how do we go from this full tool that we have now and get it down and what should that timing look like. Um, the first thing we're going to do is actually watch a full 5 minutes of a video. This video is, so you're not hearing from me the whole time. This video is Francois from PEI. He took a 15-month selection approach. So the reason I like this video is because he did start his selection 15 months out, and he kind of talks in this 5 minutes about how he did that over that time. You guys have that time on your side right now, exactly about 15 months. And what he did was focus on making the base of athletes in PEI better. So he's a ringette coach from PEI who had historical success at the 2023 games. And this is a recording of him talking about how he did that, how he did the selection. So just a sec. I gotta get, oh, Zoom is blocking my screen. There we go. Okay, hopefully that's not in your way. It's just in my way. All right, let me know if you guys can hear it as soon as I hit it with a thumbs up.
Okay. But once you get the 10 on 10 or the 12 on 12 or the 20 on 20, it becomes a
Okay.
challenge. And so I knew if we were going to do the exact same thing we always did, we would get the same result. And so we had a information session in April of 2022 to start our process after I had my 3 assistant female coaches as part of our team. And we decided we were going to do something completely different. We were going to have a 15-month tryout period where we were going to try to be the best at getting better in Canada, because I knew I couldn't out talent teams, but I could out team them. And if I had enough depth, we could outwork them, because I think that's a characteristic of the Atlantic teams, is that we're just really, really hard workers. And I saw that come through watching Corey's team, because there wasn't too many of your games that I missed watching on the live stream while I was recovering from my week there. But that 15-month tryout period, we set the goal of being the best at getting better in Canada. And what we tried to do is do some unique things. And so one of the things that we did is that part of our trial protocols was that we were going to use quantitative numbers as much as we can, give our athletes as much opportunity to improve their skills, so that we had a tough decision come at the end, because it's better to have to make selections based on ability versus trying to fill the last 3 or 4 rosters. So we purchased a set of Brower timing gates, and all our speed, quickness, and agility were done right down to the 100th of a second. We took those on the ice and we did our speed, our 10 meter, our 30 meter, our agility movements, and had it all right down so that the players could see their progress over those 15 months. And those players who wanted to work, we set them up for success. We hired a skating coach and put on a variety of skating camps so that they could improve their technical abilities. We hired Shannon McCauley to work with us through the Canadian Sport Institute at the time, and then she moved out to Calgary. But everyone in our tryout pool was able to get the Team Builder app, and if they wanted to work on their skills to build their speed, power, and agility, we provided them with the tools to do that. We as coaches, we purchased a variety of shooting tiles and softball nets. And through the off season, we would travel to all the different communities on PEI where there was ringette. And any of those players who wanted to come out and get technical advice on how to improve their shooting velocity, we had a radar gun. We tracked that. We built some specialized nets with different targets where the rings would stay in. And so we got testing on kind of our accuracy of shooting. And so we built this whole program on giving the athletes the tools to get as best as they could. Then we created the series called the Athlete Circle, and where through the entire summer, 1 night a week, we would do tactical training so that everybody would have key understanding of how it was that we were hoping to run our team, so that when we got into special situations, different games against different Canada Games tryout teams, everyone would have a similar understanding and we could evaluate them based on that. We also created what we called the intelligence circle, where every tryout we had a list of questions that were based on the rules, based on tactical things, and we would see how the players could compete and kind of learn and build on kind of what they knew. And so at the end of that 15 months, we had created a rubric where everyone got a score out of 100. And there were, most of them were quantitative measures, because in team sports, there's a lot of times you got to kind of figure out those qualitative things, but we wanted as much of it as possible as quantitative, so that we knew the numbers. We knew the athletes who were working hard. We tested them 3 times through those different series throughout that 15 months. And then our coaching staff and our evaluation staff, what we did was we watched all these athletes with the regular teams in season. and had a whole book on each player based on what they could do. And so by the time we got to our selections, we knew exactly what we had. We knew the players that were putting the output in on their own time, who were attending certain things, and we felt really good with our selection. And so kind of that was the first piece. And it was something that I think was kind of unique and novel from our standpoint anyway, because I've watched the selection procedures of PEI teams, and usually it's kind of a short window, let's get our team picked and move on. Whereas we kind of went with the philosophy, I'm going to try and work with our assistant coaches to make as many players in PEI better than what they are, so that when it comes time to selection, we have a hard selection. And it proved to work really well for us because that set the platform for our final 8 months push to the game. We picked our team in July of 2022, which Ringette Canada does 4 hubs. So they bring all the Canada Games teams together, all 9 provinces who have Canada Games Ringette teams. And we had 4 events leading up to the Canada Games where we saw all the teams. So in July, we had our team actually play against training team members from the other provinces. And then after that, we made our selection.
Okay, just gonna get us back over here for a sec. So I'm just gonna ask in the chat if anyone's willing to share kind of what they heard or something interesting from the video about Francois and his 15-month selection process. Very relevant for this group again, where most of you are very broad with your team right now. You have the 15 months. So I'm just wondering if anyone is trying a similar approach. Have you thought about it? Kind of anything that you may have taken out of that video. They said it's PEI as well, because we can all think small province, Atlantic area. Yeah, Helga, go ahead and share.
I was just going to say for fencing, we're actually struggling with getting enough diversity in our group. So the 15 months, we're certainly going to take as much time as we can to find that group. And
Mm-hmm.
then because it seemed to me like he had a lot of athletes and he could take that time to refine them. I think
Mm-hmm.
we're going to take that same idea of time, but ours is really to build the group to then refine.
Yeah. No, that's still very good though. I think one of the key messages, and you just pointed to it, is giving athletes the time. So what we have seen with some sports in different, not necessarily winter games, but is making selections super early and narrowing that group too early and focusing on just that final group. That can go sideways for a multitude of reasons. So the wide development and developing wide to a point. So he did state they were down to their final team 8 months out. I think there's a bit of a balance there that we all need to figure out for our own sports. So we had Kenzie also say, I like the youth-centered approach with the long-term goal of developing athletes and the benefit of having a team of depth. Yeah, which is very true. We have a new growing team in sport here in Nova Scotia for sport climbing. So Kenzie, I'll also say, especially with a new sport like that, you don't necessarily know who's going to be the final one to develop and be the strong athlete maybe 6 months out, especially for a new sport that may have quickly developing athletes. And the other thing to remember with these athletes as well is these are not Olympic athletes who are adults and fully formed as far as their physicality. Many of these athletes in this age group are quickly changing. So we have to take that into account as well when we're thinking about how are we planning and who's getting cut when, because many of them are very quickly growing, developing, gaining strength, potentially gaining technical skill. So just something to keep our eye on. Yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, what I really liked about it, obviously, just kind of an honest assessment of their group, what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked in the past, but just in obviously keeping that large pool together, but all the while
Mm,
being super intentful. I think that was
yep.
that probably spoke the most. Smaller province. You're not certainly going to outskill a lot of these provinces that are larger and have more resource in terms of their population. But if you can be intentful and get better at the things that you think could be a separator for you and really focus on those particular aspects, I think
Hmm.
you can create your own advantage even inside of a small province. So I really like the intentionality of how he kind of talked about that whole process, even while keeping the group large, if you want to call it that, from a
Hmm.
little bit longer.
Yeah, Kyle, that's a super important point that you're right, you nailed that he talked about is how to find the team advantage from the small provinces. And we've seen like we now have team sports from Atlantic Canada medaling at the games fairly regularly. And all the examples I've seen, you nailed it. They're finding ways to create an environment where those athletes can gain the advantage. So again, they're not going, oh, we have infinite depth and we'll just run with that, which is what some of the provinces, like Ontario, for example, they can choose their team very much last minute. They've got enough depth, they can throw it together and still perform well. Our coaches have to be thinking a little differently, really focusing on developing athletes with team sport, having the actual team functioning well in order to have the same level of performance. So, very, very true. I love that point. And that was something with my snowboard athletes. So we were lucky to have a few medals through the games that I was in for snowboard coaches. And actually, in the first photo I showed you, I had a male and a female medalist at that games. That was around that time. And the approach that we took was actually really like doubling down on the fact that we were from Atlantic Canada and the resilience that it required. So we kept saying to the athletes, you're used to riding on ice. Like our conditions are horrific here. Our hills are small, but we work harder and we get more laps because we have little hills and we have to practice more. And we did some really unique things on the snow and really dove into like we can do this because we don't have all the other things. And it worked really well. So finding your own approach, as Kyle mentioned, is key as well. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Oh, just a sec. I got my chat in front of this for you guys. I got too many screens going on here. All right. So we're just going to quickly highlight some of the selection types. So this is going to be a little different for everyone. And what I'll preface with is hopefully you're coming from a PSO that has a well-written Canada Games selection protocol that you're happy with and you're able to run with. The reality is what I tend to get a lot of questions on and what I see with our coaches is that's not always the case. And a lot of times the coaches are the ones helping put it together or being asked to give insight into it. So we're just going to quickly talk about the different types of sort of selection, the approach that you can take, again, for you to get your kind of word into what the selection protocol should look like and for you to have a good understanding of it. You heard from Francois. He spoke a lot about having a quantified approach. So that first one under A, so he wanted to have a lot of comparable numbers. So quantified, and you could do any version of these. So a quantified approach would be choosing solely based on the results and measurables, which allows you to directly compare your athletes. So it's apples to apples. So it's things like speed over a set distance that you're able to measure with each athlete, jump height, whatever that happens to be for your sport. Some sports, especially the A to B sports, are able to do that really well. There are other sports, many of which are on this call. So things like freestyle snowboarding, I'm trying to look, badminton, hockey, ringette, there are aspects that are quantifiable, but then there are other aspects that are tough to do so. So may not be able to go fully quantified selection. The qualitative selection, you're choosing based on characteristics or things that may not be as easily measured. So things like effort, applicability of tactical aspects. So can the athlete execute the tactic that you've taught them? How they think in the game, are they open when they need to be open? How do they see the game? Those types of things can be tracked, can be scored, but can sometimes be a little different. And they're not so much an A to B measurement of like this person ran so fast in 50 meters. So those are our qualitative. And then what we see is kind of the best type of selection protocol that I'll recommend to all of you to make sure that yours has aspects of is a bit of a mixture. So a selection protocol that includes a mix of quantified and qualitative aspects. And that gives you the ability to directly compare some measurables between the athletes to help you make those selections, but also gives you the flexibility to incorporate desired qualities. So there's things like coachability, commitment, again, the tactical aspects and other things that are extremely important to maybe the outcome of your game or your sport, but maybe a little harder to track. And the big thing with these selections, and again, Francois spoke about it, making sure that you're tracking everything, that you have a way to keep lots of notes, lots of things to go back to, that hopefully it's not just you, that you have a small team of coaches or at least an assistant coach or manager that you're able to share and get some outside perspectives as well. Bringing in outside people to help have an eye when you're making those team selections is also very helpful. So those are just sort of the three types. What we're going to do now is watch a couple more, again, get someone else to talk for a few minutes. We're going to watch just 3 minutes of a video showing a scorecard style approach. Um, so this was Marika, is a tennis coach, and she used a real mix of qualitative and quantitative and put them all into a scorecard. So it's just a nice way for you to have a quick look at, how you can do these and build them into a scorecard. Francois talked about how he scored each athlete out of 100. So Marika kind of gives us an example of how you could possibly do that in your sport if you haven't already done so.
Kosher, I'm going to bring to you a little explanation of how we did our Canada Games team selections in 2017. The main piece of advice that had been given to us, myself and the assistant coach manager, was to set out criteria that are as objective as possible, as little as possible of anybody's opinion or soft criteria that wasn't clear. So, to be super clear about your selection criteria and how you get to that, we set up an actual scorecard that counted out of 100 points. For several reasons. One of the main reasons at the time was the culture in tennis. I think this exists in other sports as well, where our tennis players have a bit of a loser mentality when they draw opponents from the 4 big provinces in tennis, which are the same as in some of the other sports. So Alberta, Quebec, BC, and Ontario. When our players go to nationals and they draw a player from one of those provinces, they almost automatically give up. So to address that attitude and that whole mentality, we realized it was important for us to get the buy-in from the parents as well. So we sat them all down, we first devised the scorecard, then we had a meeting before the last 2 phases of our selection process started. We divided it up into 2 periods of time. Sat the parents down and said, this is how it's going to work. I was their head coach at the time. I wanted to emphasize resilience and team player mentality. Tennis isn't really a team sport. It's a very individual sport, but you need for this event team player mentality. So we came up with a way how to integrate that into the scorecard. Okay, so it was important for the parents to hear that because they're soft in the way they raise their kids sometimes, how they make excuses for them when they lose or when they have injuries. That's one of my pet peeves, 2 of my pet peeves. When the parents help to excuse losses or why the player underperformed, number 1, and number 2, injuries, because it's such a backdoor. Okay, so we built all of that into the scorecard. Some of the criteria that's hard to quantify, you have to put to numbers. It really helped us to make it this black and white. There it is, 100 points, and they're made up like that. Ranking and results, which in the past were the main criteria, were only worth 15 out of 100 points. They're still there, but they're underemphasized because attendance, showing up to all the training camps and sessions was pointless for us to try and build a team if everybody wasn't there. So attendance to training sessions, camps, tournaments even were built in there. And then the resilience factor and this team player or doubles, which in tennis is hard to measure because people play with different partners, they play different tournaments. So those are the factors which to us were most important. This resilience factor, I made the players read a book or watch a movie about a typical underdog sports story about an individual or team. They had to summarize that, and I asked a few questions. Why do you identify with this athlete or team specifically?
Okay. So what I will say is if you're interested in seeing a little more of the details, so I paused it there because that's the overview of the scorecard. That video does go for 8 minutes, but I can send the link to everyone at the end if you really want to dive into that idea. But one sort of idea about how it could be done. I also like she talks about a few aspects that we cover. So just looking at the chat, so if you could, yeah, throw into the chat anything you found interesting or anything you picked up from that short clip. Kenzie said, I like building injuries into the scorecard. Sport climbing has a small bench, but it can be a high rate of injury. So I've been wondering how to make sure we don't have a team too early that is hurt by injury. Kenzie, yeah, very good recognition of that. It can certainly be an issue and it can change how the team ends up at the end. So that's an important one. Allison, I love finding a way to measure the soft skills like resilience and team first. Super interesting. Taking opinion out of the mix is so important, especially if you end up spending 16 months to 2 years with a group of athletes. Yeah, opinions and relationships can really get in the way. It's very true. Yeah, good point. And then keeping parents accountable for cultural attitude is a good idea too. So too, Travis, and we're hearing more and more about, the parents as, a piece of the team, especially with these young athletes. So we will continue to talk about that as we go, as well as ensuring the parents are communicated clearly too, that they understand. And actually, we'll get into a little more of that right now. Thank you guys for sharing. So we're going to keep building on that. So thinking about the timing of your selections. So really thinking about what is your process if you don't already have it set. The sooner the better as far as putting in place the selection protocol, putting it publicly so that the athletes, the parents that we just talked about, can fully understand and know what's coming. And so if you're able to kind of paint the picture for them of over the next 15 months, here's how things are going to step towards the naming of the final team, the better. Doing that last minute causes a lot of stress for a lot of people. So getting it out soon is helpful. There are times when we know that selections have to be later. There are certain sports who use kind of late events for their final selection. I'll give my own sport as one example that sometimes is a bit of a challenge that might speak to you is sometimes the national championships before the Canada Games, they would be in the March. So they would be like this March in 2026. And then your athletes are off snow all the way until this time of year, right before the games. So there are instances where, a lot of development can happen in that time, and selection may have to be in January, for example, because that's the final time that you get to see an athlete on snow, having not seen them on snow for like 8 months. So there are a few of those examples that we have where perhaps final team selection is a little later. But thinking about right now, what does that timing look like? What can it look like for your sport? The second one that I have on there, alternates. This is one that's speaking to our coaches across 56 sports and 4 provinces. When we're talking about team selections, we sometimes forget to think about alternates. So this goes back to, who was it that made the comment? Kenzie. So being very uh, thinking lots now about what is the role of your alternates. Are you going to name alternates? And if you do, what is their role from now until games? And then what are their expectations? So alternates can be a very important role for sports that have high injury rates. So say you're naming 4 athletes for the games and you name 2 alternates, being very clear what their timeline is when the final cut is where alternates are told, clearly you're not going, there hasn't been any injuries, the final team is the one going. And being clear on their expectations in the run up. Because a lot of times alternates can be very healthy to the team as far as like pushing the team to be better. The team can't set into their role and go, well, I'm named one of the 4. I'm good. I'll be going to the games, when there's alternates who, could be thrown in if something happened. On the flip side, it can also cause some negativity for those athletes who are kind of sticking around in the program, but not going to the games. So really find with those alternates, if you're going to have them, they can be a huge advantage, but you need to really think and use them in a healthy way. And again, be very clear with them on what their role and expectation is. And the last point, the communication of decisions. This really is like the biggest thing, and it ties into the appeals question mark ahead above it. So ensuring that the selection process and how it's been communicated out to the public is done as early as possible and is reaching all of the partners. So when communicating, have a plan that's going to be consistent with the treatment of all athletes. So think about when you're making your cuts, how are you communicating that out to the parents, to the athletes, to the communication or to the community? Is it potentially initially done face to face and then done electronically? Um, it's going to be an emotional process for all involved, regardless of kind of what level you're at in your selection. Any of those cut stages will be emotional for all involved. I also recommend to all of our sports, if you don't already have a 24-hour period before contacting coaches in place in your sport, especially our new coaches, this is their first games, I would recommend you put that in place now. So what that is once the selection message goes out, no parent or athlete is to contact the coach for 24 hours. And again, the reason is for them to receive the information, digest it, have emotions become a little more stable before they reach out and react. So we don't get that immediate reaction that sometimes happens and is really fired up. So that's something you can implement. And then ensuring that the appeals question mark. So ideally, we all go into Canada Games having had no selection appeals. That would be the gold standard. That's what we're all aiming for. However, we know that that's not always the case. So ensuring that your selection protocol has an appeals process, we can always help you with some best practices and with some examples if you need to. But making sure that that appeals process is very clear. We tend to see that tends to be like the high stress point for a lot of our Canada Games coaches is things were going really well until that appeal came along and then it all went sideways. And we don't want that. So the tighter the selection protocol and the better it's communicated, the less likelihood of any appeal. But if getting into an appeal, we would like to help you support to make sure that your process is good so that you can get through it without the high stress points. So this is where I'm going to shoulder tap. I had a few of my 3+ games coaches, and I see some other coaches on the line who've also been to large multi-sport international games. So if any of you guys want to jump in and share, does anyone have something from a past selection process that you felt worked really well, that you were really happy about, and you want to share with the group that could maybe help them? You can also share the second question when you share too. How far out have you typically started your selection process?
I can talk a little, Natasha.
Yeah, jump in, please.
Okay. So one of the things that has been really important with individual sport is with it coming from an individual sport is that we're really clear about which events we're going to be looking at as important because we have a points ranking system, but we also have different events that we as coaches look at as more of a priority. So where athletes maybe are putting a priority on junior nationals, but we feel that athletes going to Canada Winter Games need to be competing at a intercontinental level. And so making sure that that's super clear. And that seems to be answering a lot for parents as well, where in the past they just kind of looked at points rankings lists and were like, well, my kid has this many points, they should be going. And then we have informally started our selection process for snowboarding already. So we've sort of highlighted the athletes we're expecting to go. And we've also highlighted outliers because we know that
Yeah.
between now and
Yep.
January, we could have somebody that hits a big growth spurt. We could have, on the freestyle side of things, we could have somebody who just isn't coordinated as they're hitting airbags right now. And come next year, all their muscles have sort of suddenly coalesced and they're doing things that other athletes aren't doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and we're doing tracking in the background. So we're keeping an eye on stuff. And so
Perfect.
yeah, highlighting potential for us is really big, as well as current outcomes from the athletes. So.
I love that. Yeah, and thanks for sharing. Like that's what I was speaking about very early on in this is just that like it's hard to predict what a junior athlete is going to do right now. You don't know how fast they're going to grow or what's going to happen in the next
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's important. Would anyone else like to jump in? I saw Lynn and Allison. You guys both had your video on. Who wants to jump in?
I can go.
Yeah.
I've coached beach volleyball, indoor volleyball. I've gone for biathlon. I've gone for track and field, different ones. But with the volleyball, the beach, and the indoor, what I've done is when we get down to the final selection crunch time, I've had an independent committee come in and help, and we had a rubric and let them fill it in and give feedback and input from what they see, and not just a one-time event. Like we usually brought them in for 3 to 5 sessions, so they got a real chance to look at the athletes. But having that independent group made
Right.
such a huge difference when it came down to the final selections.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, for all of you, I think it's really important to try and do that and not have it all on your shoulders and all your eyes. Get some outside perspective in there. Allison.
Yeah, I'll just chime in. I've been to 2 games as an assistant and a head coach, and both times the selection was slightly different. I second what Lynn says. We had a selection committee where the head coach represented the coaching staff, and then we had 2 to 3 other um, kind of independent people who weren't necessarily linked to a lot of the athletes in the gym weigh in, and that is super helpful also for seeing things. Like, again, if you're involved with a group for 2 years, sometimes there are things you are not seeing, or things maybe you are choosing to see. And then the other thing I was just going to say, just coming off a games experience, is like there is no such thing as over communicating these things, especially with the parents.
Yeah.
I think in my last cycle, I shared the kind of selection process about a year out from the games, and then shared it again, 6 months after that. And even still had people kind of coming back to me asking questions and or challenging things that I had already shared with them. And I just think my biggest learning is like, it might feel like you're over communicating with parents, but there's really no such thing, especially if their child is someone who's potentially on the chopping block.
Yep.
Yeah. And the same goes to like expectations of an alternate, sharing with parents, because I think a lot of times you have those conversations about roles with athletes, and if you have a good relationship with the athlete, you think it's clear, but maybe those messages aren't getting back to home. So
100%.
sharing
Good
what the
one.
role of the alternate is, the expectations of the alternate, all that stuff with the parents well in advance.
Super important point right there. Duncan. Duncan, go ahead and unmute. Oh, Duncan, are you there? I really want to hear what you have to say. Oh, I might have frozen. You guys, am I frozen?
No, you're good.
Okay. Okay. Well, when Duncan comes back on, we'll get his point. Does anyone else have anything to share before we move on? Okay. Hopefully we'll get Duncan back in a minute. Duncan has attended major games, as well as Canada games. It won't allow you to unmute? Hold on. That's strange. I don't know, Duncan. I can't do it. Okay. Do you mind typing in what you were going to say? I know that's not as effective, or Allison, do you have any ideas if it won't allow him to unmute?
Yeah, I'm just trying to see. I don't think that we have control. We can ask
No,
to unmute, but we
I
can't
did
unmute.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. See what you can figure out there, or we'll wait for you to put the message in. But Duncan, I'm just going to slowly keep going.
Natasha, can I just
Yeah,
add one other thing that popped into my brain?
of course.
Just after my last games, I
Yeah.
think like really communicating with parents, and it might depend on your sport, but that there is a difference between the Canada Games and maybe a developmental provincial team program that their kids have been part of in the past. I
Mm,
think that was another thing, is in terms of like playing time and selection and
uh,
sort of, I don't think a lot of the parents had a clear idea that for my sport, at least, it was a performance event that we were taking a group that we wanted to perform. So
mhm.
ideas of what to expect in terms of that kind of stuff need to be clearly communicated.
Totally.
I will shut up now.
It's all good. Duncan, I see you joined on your phone. Can you unmute on that?
I think so.
We got ya. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. The only thing I was going to impart was, um, at the PEI or Canada Games level, we just have a very small athlete pool, but we tend to
Mm-hmm.
be together for a long time. I mean, my current pool of athletes consists of everybody from my last Canada Games cycle plus some new entrants. Um, at that level, we don't have a ton of alternates or a big team selection. Um, so we keep our selection very objective on the
Mm-hmm.
national and touch wood. Thankfully, we've not had any. We have had to cut an athlete here or there, not select an athlete here or there, but
Mm-hmm.
we've not had any appeals.
That's
Um,
awesome.
where I see it creep in on at the national team level, we have a gold medal profile, so there's a lot more subjectivity, a lot more scorecards,
Mm-hmm.
team dynamic, despite archery being very much an individual sport. And we see appeals almost like multiple times a year based on
Mm-hmm.
selection, right?
Yeah.
So at least at the Canada Games level, my advice would be as much as possible, keep it objective.
Mm-hmm.
Team sports, that's almost impossible. I get that, but
Yep.
that's saved us a lot of grief and capacity. We
Definitely.
don't have a ton of capacity. So
Yeah.
anyway, but yeah, good to see. I mean, we run a scorecard and Excel spreadsheets. Um,
Perfect.
we try and normalize those high performance opportunities by getting athletes to bigger events. To the tennis coach's point, we normalize by putting our athletes in higher pressure situations so that when they do have to face in a shoot off in Ontario or Quebec, Manitoba athlete, they've seen them at multiple events and
Yep.
they've competed at bigger events. But anyway, good.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
perfect, Duncan. Because, yeah, it's true. A lot of our small provinces going to the games and competing against some of the bigger, tougher provinces, it could be their first time. So, in theory, it shouldn't be. We should be trying to find opportunities to get them to see those athletes ahead of time. But I do know sometimes that's a challenge. Okay, so that's selection for today. And again, like ask any of us on the line. We have Alison, Lynn, myself. I now see Menon's on there. Some of our other provincial representatives. Claude is on there from New Brunswick. So you have people to reach out to if you have questions or concerns about your selection protocol or would like some support as you move forward. The last couple slides are just kind of touch points that I want to talk briefly about. So one is your planning priorities. So my real comment here is if you haven't taken the NCCP Comp Dev Performance Planning module, now is the time. So as Allison said at the start, they just posted for Nova Scotia the winter modules. Again, Lynn and Manon and Claude are on the line. Reach out to those guys and find out when the next performance planning module is if you haven't taken it. That module is, it's a big one, but it will talk you through how to plan the 12 months out before the games. Our next session in May focuses on YTPs and that like 11, 12 months out planning. Well, I guess it's a little less than that, but so we're not going to dive into it now, but it is something to think about. You're currently 459 days, I think now, until the games. So hopefully you're starting to look at what is the development of your athlete between now and then, as well as what is this phase looking like for the athletes. So a couple quick points on that. Making sure that you're focused on things like major strength gains, changing physiology with the athletes because you have time on your side at this point. Lots of time for technical changes, learning to apply new mental strategies, focusing on learning new things, implementing new systems, and building the base. Those are all great things that you have time on your side to do right now. You'll see in the next two sessions as we narrow in on the time, you're not going to have time to do these things in the last few months before the game. So ensuring that those things are happening. Claude just said in New Brunswick they're hosting a performance planning in January and it's up in the locker. So perfect if you're in New Brunswick, jump into that. Like I said, we'll dive much further into this in session two. I'm going to throw out this book recommendation and, throw in the chat if you have some others on this building successful teams. There's a ton of really great books on this subject, some really great sport books, some really great business books. This is one that's really great, The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. So starting to think now about how you're going to build trust with parents have come up a lot tonight or today, and it's really important, but also building trust with club coaches, your assistant coaches, other coaches involved in the games, and your athletes, the wide pool and then the narrow pool. It's a good time to start thinking about creating your team vision and values. So perhaps not now, but in a few months when you're narrowing that group, what is that team vision and values for that last year out for the games. And then sharing your coaching philosophy with the parents, with the athletes, and kind of the community so that everyone understands, what are your goals for the games? What are you about? Why are you involved? Ensuring that that's really tight. We're not going to do this one. So just something to consider. We don't have enough time, but I want you to kind of reflect on your own is how many athletes you'll train with this winter versus take to the games. So sort of you're in your final test season, we'll call this winter, before your big competition season of the Canada Games winter. And what is your current planning priority over the next 3 months as you roll into winter? So something to reflect upon. And then as we close, I'm just going to share, we do have a YouTube channel if you haven't found it already. So the CSI Atlantic has a coaching YouTube channel with a ton of really great videos that are free access for you to look at. This will eventually be posted on that as well. But if you're looking for like great team nutrition information, entry level mental performance sessions that you can share with athletes and their parents. There's a ton of them on there. A lot of them are organized by group, so you can go on and see all the nutrition ones. So I recommend that you go take a look at that. Also, I keep mentioning your provincial coaching representatives, who many of them are on the call. So reaching out to them as great resources as you prepare for the games. And then we also have the big NCCP e-learning bank. So I, said at the start, you should go on and do that Canada Games session. That's the first one I would start with, as well as all your CompDev modules that I'm sure some of you are working through. So making sure we don't forget about that. And the last thing that I'll end with today is just a little question. If you could throw in the chat what you're hoping to get out of our time in the spring. So this would be in May when we run our next session. So also, if you don't have, you don't have to do it in the chat right now. You could send me an email, just respond to the email that I sent you about today. Think about it and send me an email. But I want you guys thinking about, what are some things that maybe we didn't chat about today that you're very curious about, things that you think would be helpful for the group. Like I said, the next one we do focus in on planning, but we have other aspects that we have flexibility in building in. So I'll close with ending with that. And I'll throw up myself and Allison's contact. Maybe Manon, Claude, and Lynn, if you want to throw your emails in the chat as well so people can grab them. And I can also include them in the follow-up email, which I will send after this. So I'll send a link to the recording, the slides, as well as a couple links, like the video links are embedded right in the slides. Then you've got your contacts. So I want to thank you guys. Thank you for taking an hour out of your day and coming on today. Definitely want to create a bit of a community with this group and give you guys the ability to connect with each other, start to recognize some names, and and bring you some more information in May. And I will stay on for questions if you have a few at the end. And if not, jump off, have a super lovely day, and we'll chat with you at the next session.
Thanks, Natasha.
You are so welcome.
Thank you
Thanks,
very much.
Natasha. Bye, guys.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much, Natasha.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you very much.